Hi, my name is Mara Benjamin, and I'm the curator at the Erland Lee Museum Home in Stoney Creek, Ontario. Today's seminar, entitled Researching Family Histories the Women's Institute Way, will go over the Erland Lee Museum Home. We will discuss the history and ongoing work of the Federated Women's Institutes of Ontario, and we'll talk a little bit about the Digitization Project and how you can use the FWIO's virtual archives to do your own genealogical research. Let's get started. So the Erland Lee Museum Home is located on the Niagara Escarpment in Stoney Creek. The house was originally built as a log cabin in 1808 by John and Mary Moore Lee, and 6 generations of the Lee family lived in the home and renovated it until it was sold to the Federated Women's Institutes of Ontario, and we will be celebrating our 50th anniversary next year in 2022. The museum is open for tours on Fridays and Saturdays between 11 and 4 or by appointment, and it is available for event and photography rentals as well. Within the Erland Lee Museum Home is the dining room, and this is where the Women's Institute was founded back in 1897. Erland invited Adelaide to speak at Squires Hall in Stoney Creek on February 12, 1897. A week later, on February 19, 1897, over 100 women packed into Squires Hall to hear Adelaide's words. Following that meeting, several of those women came back to the Lee family home known as Edgemont, and Janet Lee penned the Constitution of the Women's Institute. From there, the WI has spread internationally. The Women's Institute, often referred to as the WI, is an international organization focused on empowering, educating, and supporting women from all walks of life. These are the pillars of the organization, which are represented through our motto for home and country. A Tweedsmire is a community history book compiled by a Women's Institute branch or provincial organization, and the purpose of these books is to preserve community histories. It is the effort of the Federated Women's Institutes of Ontario to find and digitize all of these books and make them available freely to the public through our virtual archives website. Tweedsmuirs get their name from Lord and Lady Tweed Smear. Lord Tweedsmuir was born John Buckin, 1st Baron Tweedsmuir, in 1875, and he was Canada's 15th Governor-General. Lady Tweedsmuir, her name was Susan Buckin. She was incredibly passionate about education and literacy. Under her guidance, over 40,000 books were sent out west from Murdo Hall in what would later be known as the Lady Tweedsmuir Prairie Library Scheme. The idea of putting together local history books in Ontario was actually conceived in the 1920s by a committee under the Federated Women's Institutes of Ontario Board called the Committee for Historical Research and Current Events. Lady Tweedsmuir had become an active member of the Women's Institute in Ontario. By 1930, she recommended to her branch of the Athens Women's Institute that they should be putting together community history books similar to projects already being done in England at that time. From there, it became a provincial project. This campaign encouraged branches across the province to prepare Tweedsmire history books in preparation for the WI's 50th anniversary celebrations in 1947. There's a variety of information that is included in Tweedsmires, and they can vary from basic scrapbooks of newspaper clippings and photographs to extremely in-depth histories of a community. Many of them include farm histories written by descendants of the farm settlers or by local archivists. They include photographs with detailed descriptions, and many of them include details about Women's Institute events, such as meetings and celebrations. In many cases, Tweedsmires are the only written historical documentation of a small community, so they're incredibly valuable when researching the history of a small town in Ontario. While we know that Indigenous occupation in what is now Stoney Creek goes back to time immemorial, the historical context generally focused on within Tweedsmire history books is only from the time of European settlement, so generally from the end of the 1700s or from the beginning of the 1800s, depending on the community that the book is focusing on. These books offer a unique look into the history of a community as recorded by the members of said community. We get to see what locals thought was worth recording and read what they felt should be remembered by future generations. This becomes especially important when we look at Tweedsmires as a means of recording and accurately portraying women's histories. As anyone who has tried to trace the matrilineal line of their family knows, finding women in the genealogical and historical records can be incredibly difficult, and this is for a variety of reasons. First, women were traditionally recorded by their husbands' names. So, for example, who we know as Janet Chisholm Lee would have been recorded as Mrs. Erland Lee. Second, women have traditionally taken their husband's name upon marriage. This is very common, especially in the historical record. And this can make it really difficult to find female relatives or community members if you don't know their maiden name at the very least, and it's very helpful if you know their parents' name. Third, most recorded histories center around men. When women were not viewed as noteworthy members of society, they were often given only very small note in the historical record. There have always been those that valued the contributions of women to history and recorded their work, but that is not the norm. That is not the standard by which history is written. So when we have Tweedsmuirs that were predominantly written by women, that focused on the activities of women, and most importantly, recorded the names of those women, these can be invaluable resources when trying to trace the matrilineal line of a family or when searching for a particular woman in the historical record. So now let's talk a little bit about the Tweedsmire Digitization Project as it stands today. Let me begin by quoting one of our Tweedsmire Digitization coordinators. Irene Robillard says, "Digitization started in earnest with an agreement with the Ontario Genealogical Society starting near the end of 2009, just before I became the provincial Tweedsmire coordinator in early 2010. Prior to this, some branches, districts, areas, and museums, archives, or libraries were digitizing their records, but there was no online platform for the WI to put this information on. And the museums, libraries, and archives were putting WI items on their websites without always recognizing who created these awesome books. So we wanted to take back ownership of our books." Irene goes on to say that a lot of the digitizing was accomplished, except there was never an e-library created for these documents. She was preparing information to go out to branches on how digitizing might be accomplished on their own when the Library and Archives Canada, or LAC's, first Documentary Heritage Community Program was announced in the summer of 2015. So this project has been ongoing from basically 2010 till now. Collecting, digitizing, and publishing all of these documents has been a long, tedious, and extremely rewarding process. The project has entailed collecting, scanning, and returning physical Tweedsmuirs from across Ontario, then uploading, sorting, describing, reviewing, and finally publishing digital copies of the book on our virtual archives website. To date, roughly 3,500 documents have been digitized. That is thousands upon thousands of pages of historical documents. So now let's take a look at the FWIO's virtual archives, where digitized Tweedsmuirs and other related historical documents are stored and available for the public to view freely. This site has a convenient search function that allows you to search through thousands of documents for key terms. So once you've found a document that you want to explore, either using the search function or using the scroll menu to find a document you're looking for, take a look at the description at the top left to see what sorts of materials are included within this document. Next to the description section, you will also see one that says comments, and it's here that you'll see any comments or questions that have been left by community contributors. Once you've checked out the document's description and any comments that interest you, you go back up to the top of the page and select a page using the drop-down menu on the top left. So let's say you're looking to do your own research on your community or your family history, but you want to find specific information about a family, a person, a place, or event within a specific document. So rather than starting on page 1, you're going to go to the search within this title function. And that's going to allow you to narrow your search to within one document rather than the entire archive. How can you get involved? If branches are interested in having their Tweedsmuirs digitized and added to the FWIO archives, or if you know of books that are out there in your community that you would like to see digitized and put on our archives, the first thing you should do is reach out to our digitization team. You should email Linda Mitchell If you know of any Tweedsmuirs that are digitized online elsewhere, perhaps through your local archive or university, you should send an email to Irene Robillard so that she can link that information to our website. One area that you can personally get involved is by helping us with the digitization process. So post-scanning, a lot of what we do is behind the scenes. We write metadata, which is that description that you saw earlier. So one of the things you can do is help write these descriptions, or you can help do privacy reviews. It's very important that we look through every single book before it goes public to ensure that there are no privacy issues. We don't want to be publishing someone's personal contact information or address. And for additional details on this project, or if you have any questions at all, you can always reach out to the digitization team, that being myself, Irene Robillard, or Linda Mitchell, and we would all be very happy to answer your questions. Nearly 125 years after the WI began, we continue to record our histories for those who come after us through the creation of Tweedsmuir Community History Collections. Thanks to the support of Library and Archives Canada and the hard work of WI volunteers and staff, we have been able to scan and make public thousands of Tweedsmuirs through the Virtual Archives website. While our methods of preserving history may have changed from physical to digital, our dedication to communities remains the same, for home and country.